And I looked at what these people were like and what they believed. Now, I had met Christians, and I was the, if you wanted to go out and talk to somebody about Christianity, I was the last person you ever wanted to talk to, because by the time I was done debating you, you were crying. I was not kind. I made it a point of hurting them verbally. That's part of that moral rot. And so I started hanging around with these guys, and they were just different. They're like this little patch of green in a sea of rot. It's hard to describe. And I was just drawn to that. And so I started hanging around with them more. And so one of them, Harry and his wife Bev, they invited me to go to church with them. And I was like, yeah, okay. Being Jewish is, if you ever get to witness to a Jewish person, it can be one of the most frustrating things you will ever do in your life. We know our position with God. God picked us. They didn't pick you. Sorry. And any pet belief you have on your own, good luck with that. But I know my position with God. He picked us. Right? That's kind of the Jewish mindset. So I had no fear of going and hanging around with people that believed this other stuff. And because it was just so, they're embodying this image you had of the kind of person you would like to be, in contrast to the kind of person I was. And I like being around that. So I started hanging out with them and doing stuff with them. I'd go to church with them. And they told the pastor about me, and he came and gave me a book called Betrayed. And another book, it's actually several books, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And the book Betrayed it's actually a true story. And it's about a father whose daughter goes off to college, becomes a Christian, comes home, and this is, if within Jewish circles, if you go off and get saved and come back and you believe in Jesus, it's like you're a traitor to the family. I mean, they'll disown you. In some cases, it's pretty severe. And so she comes back and tells her father, I'm saved. And he's like, I'm going to redeem my daughter. I'm going to prove to her this is wrong. So he goes on a quest to prove that she's wrong and that Scripture is wrong, the Bible's wrong about what it says about Jesus. And by the end of the book, he can't help it. He's come to realize that it's actually true in a factual sense, in a historical sense, which is what Evidence That Demands a Verdict is about. It's a very intellectual book. And at some point, he gets saved. And so he believes that Jesus is the Messiah. The Messiah we put the cup out for at Passover, that he did, in fact, come back exactly like he promised. Man, that still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up every time I think about it. And he goes to his wife and says, I'm sorry, I failed. I believe Jesus is the Messiah. And his wife looks at him and says, oh, well, it's about time, we've been waiting for you. She had gotten saved in the process too. And I read this book and I was like, really? So I started reading Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And so that was the process I was going through. And I ended up moving to Atlanta. And someone I know experienced a psychotic break. And it happened at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I hope you never get to experience that, seeing what that's like for somebody to go through. They lose their mind right in front of you. And you don't know what to do. I had no idea. I mean, I've never been trained on anything remotely like this. And so here I am in a strange city. I don't know anybody. I don't know what to do. And the people I'd been hanging around with in Florida knew this one church here in Atlanta. So in desperation, I got the phone book out and looked up, and they had a telephone number you could call anytime, 7 by 24 for help. So I called them, and they helped me get this person to a hospital at like 3 o'clock in the morning and get situated and get things taken care of. And that had happened at the beginning of the summer, uh, end of May, June, beginning of June. And I had been planning on going to visit my brother. And so I had to call him after this event happened and said, hey, there's no way I can come visit now. I've got this thing I'm handling. And one thing that, having done so many operations, you have this complete belief in your ability to handle whatever you're thrown at you. I've never failed a mission, right? And God gave me a mission that is impossible to handle. I can wear an enemy down because they're another person. They're suffering just like I'm suffering. But how do you fight the wind? The wind doesn't even know you exist, or the weather. He gave me a problem like that, and that's this person who was having this psychotic break. No matter how many hours I worked, no matter how, I would go visit him every day in the hospital. I was working like 16 hours a day, plus going to the hospital and stuff. I'd go to the hospital, go back to work, get up at like 5 in the morning, and go back to work. And I was fine with this. I'm like, yeah, man, this is what I'm built for. I can handle this. But over time, this really started to grind on me. And I recognized that when you're doing operations of this sort, you have to have a break eventually. It will, over time, if it's indefinite, can grind you down like an eraser. That's what you're trying to do to your enemy. And you're hoping they break first, right? In my case, my enemy doesn't even know I exist. How do you fight that? Well, at the end of the summer, it started to lighten up a bit, and I was going to have a chance to go visit my brother. So I called him and said, hey, I want to come down and visit on this weekend. It would come down like a Friday, come back on Sunday afternoon. And he says, yeah, sure, come on down. So I hang up the phone, and as sooner than I hung up the phone, and I cannot explain why I did this. I have no explanation for this. I immediately picked up the phone, called him back. Now, my brother had been saved back when he was in the Navy. And I called him back and said, hey, are you going to church on Sunday? And he goes, oh, yeah, I was getting ready to call you back. Yeah, we haven't been to church in a while, and this was going to be our first day back, and we were going to be gone most of Sunday, and we didn't want you to come and visit. Since we weren't going to be here a whole day, that wasn't quite fair. So we were going to say, we're going to arrange for a different time. And I said, no, that's okay. I called you back because could I go with you? And he said, sure. So I go there, and my brother, we go to church with him, and it's a very tiny church, and the pastor teaches the adult class. And so we go into this class, and he says, oh, hey, we're studying the book of John. And he hands me this little paper study tract that they have. It's got the book of John and study text and stuff in it. So I don't know anything about what they're doing, and he's talking about it. So I'm sitting there reading the book of John. I'm reading the first part. And all of a sudden, it's like I see something in the text that I don't understand. It's this understanding comes over me that I can't describe. And I kid you not, I hear a voice that says, would you like to know what that means? This is hard to talk about. It was overwhelming on a scale I cannot begin to describe. I came to realize that every person I'd ever talked to, including synagogue, every businessman, every person I ever talked to, had given me a puzzle piece of a picture of life, of the universe and everything. But it's a puzzle piece. You don't know what the picture looks like. You don't even know where this piece goes in the picture. You don't have the lid to the puzzle box. And he says, would you like to know what this means? And all at once showed me the entire picture. where every piece that every person had ever told me fit in that picture. Who Jesus was. It was so overwhelming. It was beyond words. Today I can't put words to it. I was so excited. My brother, he asked me, are you all right? Do you need medical help? Because I was like a ping pong ball in a tornado. I couldn't speak a complete. It was like, do you, that's what I was talking like, because it was so overwhelming. So I go back home and immediately start going to church. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just know that's what I need to do. And every time I go in, they'll say, well, if you're serious, you'll be back here Monday for prayer meeting. And then again, they'd say, if you're serious, you'll come back on Wednesday. And if you're serious, and they kept saying that. And it's like, well, I'm serious. I'm hardcore. You have no idea, right? So every time I go in, of course, they say, if you're a visitor and like to know more, there's a little card you fill out. So I fill out the card. They said, fill out the card to fill out the card. So I probably filled out a dozen of these at this point. So I'm sitting at home one day, working in my office from home, and I hear a knock at the door. And I open the door, and there's this older guy with two young guys, maybe 20s. And he says, hi, we're from this church. We got your card. And I did something that startled him no end. I reached out to shake hands with him. When he shook hands with me, I grabbed his hand and dragged him through the door. Sit, I have questions. And I started bombarding him with questions. What I did not know is they were part of a program to teach people how to evangelize. And he was there teaching these kids how to do this. And I had completely driven him completely off script. Whatever he had planned to do was not working, I was all over the place. And we were sitting there and he's talking to me and he's given up all hope of whatever he was planning on doing. And he's got this little tract out. And the thing I remember about the tract is on the very end, there's a chasm. And this is our separation from God, this chasm. And we cannot cross this chasm on our own. And we're on one side, God's on the other. And we're incapable of crossing that chasm. And Christ is the bridge that lets us reunite with God. And I'm thinking about, I didn't hear anything. It's like in one of those movies where the person's talking and they kind of go off in the distance, the person's thinking in their own head. That's what I was doing. And I'm thinking, I don't understand. I've listened to everything that all these Christians have professed, the things they stand for, the things they believe. And I've heard so many motivational speakers say the same words, but never mention that it came from Scripture. And as long as they don't mention it came from the Bible, they're pillars of men, heroes of society. The minute they say, God said it, they're pilloried on the spot. And I thought, that's a little weird. They're saying the same thing. What is there in the Bible that it asks you to do that if you did it and didn't mention that the Bible told you to do it, they would not consider you a great person in life, a moral person, somebody who stands for values that are true? No one. No one would have a word against you. But if you say the Bible told you to do it, they think you're crazy. That in and of itself spoke volumes to me that there's some kind of spiritual battle going on here. I don't quite get it, but I cannot understand any reason I would not want to do this. This seems like something truly worth pursuing. This would change my life. This would put me back on the track of being the person I thought I might be. And about the time I thought that, I kid you not, I heard a voice. And it said, no, it would be bad. It sounded pretty much like that. And I went, excuse me? What? And he said, it would be bad. And I said, really? Could you be a little more specific? Give me some details. Exactly how would it be bad? Now I'm back to my debating. And all he could say was, it would be bad. And I went, you're a liar. At that point, I turned to the guy and I said, so what do we need to do? He went, what? I said, what do we need to do? Do you pray? What do you do? He says, yeah, here's this prayer that says you're going to obey Jesus and do what he said. I said, okay, let's do it. He was so shocked. I mean, now it's gone completely sideways. And so we did that. And I felt this sense of relief beyond words. I was so excited. They leave, I go back to work. I hear another knock at the door. I open the door, it's these two guys. Hey, we got your card. I filled out like a dozen of them. I have questions. I drug him through the door. Well, I talk to them. They leave. I go back to work. I hear another knock at the door. It's another guy. I drag him in. I have to ask him questions. And what I've discovered in that process, and this was a long time ago at this point, but what I discovered in this process was that, yeah, I was not a good person. And I can tell you exactly how and why I'm not a good person. As before, it was kind of this vague, I'm not the person I should be. Now I know the person I should be. So now I have a truly good model of what it means to be a good person. And that's to be as Jesus. He's a living example of the kind of person we should be. And more importantly, he's actually walked the way we've walked. He's had to deal with life just like we've had to deal with life. So he knows exactly the kinds of problems we face. It's not theoretical to him. And so he's faced these things. He says, yeah, I face this, but don't do this, do this. And this is why. Well, there are, in the process, going back to after all this happened, I was under some really bad circumstances with this person with the psychotic break. I was still working mega hours. Nothing had changed. And I'd seen, I've got this picture of what I could be, but I'm still not on that path. So I was leaving the hospital one day and realizing that God had shown me that he had given me if I thought I was all that, he'd given me an enemy I could never defeat. That enemy didn't even know I existed. It would be here long after I was gone. And I was going to fail a mission. Epically. And I was walking out of the hospital one day on my way back to work. And I said, Lord, I'm not going to survive this mission, am I? And his immediate response was, no, you're not. And I said, well, then what am I supposed to do? I mean, if I got to keep going and it just kills me, fine. I'm good with that. But, I mean, that's what I signed up for the military, right? And I said, well, then what am I supposed to do? And he said something that so startled me. To this day, it's an indelible mark. And he said, you should do what I told you to do. And I said, what did you tell me to do? He says, now that's your first good question.